And welcome into this Tuesday edition of CBS Sports HQ. Amanda Guerra, Chris Hassel with you. I am perky. Chris is negative about everything. It is Taco Tuesday. I'm excited about golf. We're trying to convince you to get excited about this week.
It's a wide open field this week at the 3M.
Thank you. Positivity.
Most of the best golfers in the world are taking this week off. Some of them, though, are making the trip to just outside the Twin Cities in Minnesota for the 3M Championship, including Dustin Johnson and Brooks Koepka. They're the headliners. And it also marks the return of a top 15 golfer in the world, Tommy Fleetwood, making his first appearance since the restart. He's in a featured group with DJ and Tony Finau. Brooks Koepka in another one of our featured groups with Keith Mitchell and Charles Howell III. Defending champ Matthew Wolff headlining another featured group. And Bubba Watson as well is with Pat Perez and Paul Casey. So let's talk 3M Open with Kyle Porter and Doug Bell. Kyle Porter is the only one we have right now. Is that correct? Doug Bell joining us in just a little bit. Kyle, get us excited for this one. You know, it's kind of like the week after a major championship when the field really shrinks. Why should we be excited about the 3M Open?
I think you're right about it being the week after a major championship. We see this with tournaments like the RBC Heritage, right, where you're like, it's kind of chill, kind of relaxed the week after the Masters. This has the same kind of vibe, but here's what's really interesting. Of course, the tournament, the 3M Open trophy is up for stake. There's a ton of different storylines at the top with DJ, Brooks Koepka, and Tony Finau, who's in the field, all kind of struggling in different ways, right? They all saw different levels of kind of adversity last week. They could all rebound this week, but the storyline that I'm really looking at, we've got some spots up for the U.S. Open. We saw a couple of spots last week go to Mackenzie Hughes and Ryan Palmer. They were the two highest finishers in the top 10 at the Memorial who hadn't already qualified for the U.S. Open. That's going to happen again this week. We got the two highest finishers in the top 10 who are not yet qualified for the U.S. Open. They get in by contending this week. So there's a lot of guys in this field who are not yet in the U.S. Open. So there's kind of a tournament within a tournament that I think is going to be really fascinating come the weekend.
How about one of those feature groups, including Brooks Koepka? I'm a bit surprised that Koepka's playing because he was concerned about the knee injury. I know the MRI was okay for him last week. I thought he might take some time off to try to rest that knee. Are you surprised at all?
Well, I'm not really, because he took 3 months off and it didn't help, right? Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like, well, if I'm going to take that much time off and it's still going to hurt, and I'm not really going to injure it further by playing, which I presume is the case, then I might as well get out there and play. I mean, look, I think this is something worth being concerned about. We got the PGA Championship coming up. Koepka right now would not be in the FedEx Cup playoffs if the season ended today. So there's a lot of like, what's going on here with Koepka type vibes, and he really needs to have a couple of hot tournaments in a row. We saw top 10 at the RBC Heritage a few weeks ago. He wasn't very good at Memorial. He hasn't been very good for, we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of his last win, which was at the WGC event in Memphis right after the Open Championship last fall. So, last summer. So he's got a ton of work to do and a lot to prove, I think, over the next few weeks.
Who's the golfer you're most excited to watch this week?
Well, I think Fleetwood is up there, but for me, it's probably Matthew Wolff. He's a guy who's played really well of late. Obviously, finished runner-up at the Rocket Mortgage Classic a few weeks ago. He's the defending champion here. He struck the ball great at Muirfield Village. I thought he was just kind of lights out from tee to green for a lot of that tournament. Closed with a 40 on the back nine on Sunday, so his finish wasn't that great. But I'm intrigued to see him as kind of the top dog. You know, there's not a ton of names in this field. He's the defending champ. He's playing better than DJ and then Brooks Koepka right now. So he's not the favorite in Vegas or otherwise, but he is certainly one of the 2, 3, 4 biggest names in this field, and that's not a position he's found himself in that much of the course of his professional career.
You mentioned Tommy Fleetwood, who is making his return to tour, his first event, and I believe this is the 7th event since the restart. Why haven't we seen him recently on tour?
Well, him and Adam Scott were kind of the same deal. They didn't want to come over to the United States, have to quarantine for a couple of weeks. These guys have families. They have their own lives. They're doing their own thing. So there was some logistical issues with travel there. But look, Fleetwood started the year really hot. He had like 5 top 12s in his first, in 6 events, kind of dating back to December of 2019. Then he missed the cut at the Arnold Palmer. Then he shot a 78 in the first round of the Players' Championship. So it kind of ended unceremoniously, but he, at the beginning of 2020, I think you could argue he was the hottest golfer in the world. So I'm interested to see where his game is at leading into the PGA Championship in a couple of weeks, the U.S. Open, where he's had a lot of success in a month. I think he's certainly somebody to keep an eye on this weekend.
He's the number 12 golfer in the world as of right now. We're going to get winning picks for the 3M Open in just a little bit, but want to take a step back here because this is an anniversary for Phil Mickelson. It was 7 years ago today that he won his last major championship, his 5th major championship. It was at the British Open. But Kyle, Phil, I think it's been 4 years now since he's finished top 15 in a major. He's 50 years old. Nobody's won a major at this age. Have we seen the last of Phil Mickelson winning or at least competing on Sunday in a major championship?
I think probably so. Man, that 66 at Muirfield in 13 was unbelievable, by the way. It was so good. That was one of the great rounds of his life, maybe the greatest round of his life. But I think to answer your question, the tournament that I look at for him, I think he can contend at Augusta in his 50s, right? You can spray it all over the place off the tee there. He's so smart there. He has so much course knowledge there, kind of like Tiger. I mean, Tiger in 19, when he won at the Masters last year, he wasn't that great. I mean, he won the Masters, but it wasn't like he went out and had to shoot 65 to do it. He was just smarter than everybody else. Everybody else just played into his hands. And so I think there is an opportunity for Phil to make a run at 52, 53 at Augusta. But the other major championships, he's going to have a really difficult time based on the way he's playing right now to contend at those.
If everything ends like this and he doesn't win a major, he doesn't get that elusive U.S. Open championship, 6-time runner-up there, how much is that going to impact his legacy?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't think it negatively impacts it as much as having won the U.S. Open would sort of positive. I don't think people really take away just because. I mean, the body of work is so extensive. He would have been the 6th guy to join the Grand Slam Club, having won all 4 majors over the course of his career. I have him as like a top 12 golfer of all time, and I think because he's done it in this era with Tiger kind of adjacent to him, with Ernie Els, with Vijay Singh, with Rory McIlroy, with Jordan Spieth. I mean, to do what Phil's done, to win 44 times on the PGA Tour, 5 major championships, those 6 U.S. Open runners-up, they're not. I don't know. I don't think it really takes a ton away from the rest of his body of work over the course of his career.
Phil not in the field this week. Perhaps he's practicing his 78-yard putts from the fairway this week in the off week. Phil Mickelson, always interesting to watch with that coffee cup. Kyle Porter, thanks. We'll get back to you in just a minute. Check out the First Cut podcast. Kyle Porter, a contributor there, but the latest episode, Rick Gaiman and Greg Ducharme, as they always do on Tuesday, breaking down the field of the upcoming 3M Open from a daily fantasy angle. And you can also get involved in our Golf Props Challenge, $3,000 guaranteed up for grabs, and it is free. CBSSports.com/golfprops.
Still to come on HQ, the number 4 golfer in the world, Dustin Johnson. He's the favorite to win at the 3M. But is he really? What are experts laying money on him? We get their opinions and their picks for the week next. So right now, according to our partners at William Hill, Dustin Johnson is the favorite to win the 3M Open. He is, after all, the number 4 golfer in the world and won Travelers a matter of weeks ago. Now, all of that said, he's also missed 2 cuts in the past 4 starts. That's more missed cuts than he had in all of 2018 and 2019. And last week finished second to last at Memorial with a 16 over par, the double Jerry Rice, as our Kyle Porter puts it. So taking a look at the odds there, according again to our partners at William Hill, Dustin Johnson, again the favorite, closely followed by Tony Finau and Brooks Koepka. Also the return of Tommy Fleetwood. All right, let's bring in Doug Bell and Kyle Porter to discuss all of this and get some of their picks. Kyle, I wrote in the prompter, what on earth do you do with Dustin Johnson? Is he really the favorite in your opinion?
No, I don't think he is. I don't think he can be. You can't go 80-80. Now, I do think it's worth mentioning, this is something Rick and I were talking about, I think on the podcast or at the end of last week. Dustin Johnson's shortest memory in all of golf. Like he won't even, he might not even remember that he played in the Memorial last week, much less that he shot 80-80. So I think if you're looking for reasons for optimism with DJ, I saw Justin Ray had a great stat on Twitter about how DJ's won 3 times when missing the cut in his previous start, which a lot of guys don't win 3 times in a career. DJ's done it 3 times when basically being terrible in his last start out. So I do think there are reasons, for optimism with DJ. He's obviously, I think, the most talented guy in the field. But it's just been so volatile over the last 15 months that I don't know how you can go into this and trust what you're going to get from Dustin Johnson.
I think DJ is the favorite by reputation alone. Now, he is number 4 in the world. He won for the 21st time at the Travelers just 3 weeks ago, and he's won 13 years in a row in the PGA Tour. Only Jack and Tiger have done that. So there's a lot on the resume, but that 80-80 is inexplicable. The first 80, okay, it was a tough track. He hadn't played in a couple of weeks, but then to come back with another 80, I never remember a player of his caliber doing that. I mean, that's not only embarrassing, but it's just it's head scratching. So we'll see what happens this week. It's an easier golf course, clearly, TPC Twin Cities, but there's got to be something lingering from that. We got to know why. So I'm anxious to see what happens with DJ this week up in Blaine, Minnesota.
I don't really know if he knows why. Like Kyle said, short memory, so maybe he's just going to bounce back and it'll be fine. All right, let's dive into some picks here, and we're going to start with sleeper. Doug Bell, who's your sleeper going into the 3M?
Well, there's so many potential sleepers, and that's the great thing about a tournament like this, because some of the big names are taken off. But I like Lucas Glover. Now, here's a guy who's 40 years old. He won the United States Open. He won at Wells Fargo. Now, granted, that was 9 years ago. But here's a guy who still, if you ask the players on tour about great ball strikers, they'll say, oh, Lucas Glover, there's no question. He's a rare player who does not use a golf glove. He's never used one his entire life, and that's why I kind of like him. And he's just a down-home guy, a Clemson University guy. His putting has been his problem for many years, and he has simplified things. And I think Lucas Glover, right now, if you look at what he's done on the restart, there were 3 top 21s, and last week really battled hard, tied for 38th at the Memorial. Hey, listen, Lucas Glover, his odds were a little better than I thought they might be, but I think this guy still has something left in the tank, and he's my sleeper, Lucas Glover.
28-1, Doug. He's one of the favorites. He's one of like the 8 favorites here. Let's go. I'm going a little deeper. I've got Doc Redman. Doc is more like, I think he's 50-1, somewhere in that range. Doc Redman is somebody who has kind of quietly played pretty good golf. I believe he missed the cut at Memorial last week, but he's played well throughout 2020. And I think what's interesting is, if you look at his stats, he's striking the ball beautifully. From tee to green, he's been awesome. He's not putting it very well, and traditionally, he's a pretty good putter. He's only had like a year and a half out on the PGA Tour of data to kind of go off of, but his putting stats right now are lower than what they've been in the past. So I think there's a chance that could rebound over the course of the next few months, and we could see some real contention from Doc Redman at some of these upcoming events.
All right, as Doug mentioned, a lot of potential sleepers. Let's now go with a top 10 lock. This feels a little bit weaker than the other tournaments that we've seen. You do get DJ Brooks, Tony Finau, as I mentioned, the return of Tommy Fleetwood. Kyle, who is your top 10 lock?
Well, I almost went with Lucas Glover here because I agree with Doug. He's playing just beautiful golf, really, really good from tee to green. But I'm gonna go with Tony Finau. I kind of labored over this because if you look at his first 2.5 days at Memorial, I mean, he was unbelievable. Like the way he was hitting the ball, he was so good. He obviously fades really badly over the last day and a half, but I just think the talent in this field is supreme. I think him and DJ and Brooks are so much better than everybody else in this field. And of those 3, Finau's clearly playing the better golf of them. So I really like Finau as, he's not the favorite, but he's among them, and I think he has the most talent of the guys that are playing well at the top of this board.
My top 10 lock is Harris English. If you were going to give a comeback player of the year, and I'm not sure they do that anymore in the PGA Tour, but he would be one of the leading candidates. He lost his playing privileges a year ago and now has come back strong with 5 top 10s. He's number 26 right now in the FedEx Cup points race. And if you look at scoring, and that's what I look at, I mean, you can throw in all the stats, but how are these guys scoring? What are they writing down in the scorecard? And Harris English is tied for 11th. He's 69.75 in scoring. These are some tough tracks. Now, he's gotten off just to a slow start because he's only played twice on the restart. He did that by design because he feels he's playing so well that he'll have an opportunity now with some of these huge events coming up. So again, Harris English, he's won 3 times on the PGA Tour. It has been a while, but here's a guy who has rediscovered really one of the sweetest golf swings on the PGA Tour. Listen, Harris English, I think from here on out, he's a top 10 lock virtually every week. He's playing that well.
I have a feeling, looking into my own crystal ball, that Kyle Porter might agree with you. So let's do picks to win. Kyle, we'll start with you.
I do agree with Doug. Harris English is playing great. He's had 2 top 20s in a row. Kind of quiet top 15 last week at the Memorial. Kind of sneaked in there below the radar. Beat Rory, beat Tiger, beat Matthew Wolff, beat DJ by a lot. Beat all these different guys at that tournament. And again, he's an unbelievable ball striker. I was watching him a couple years ago at Colonial at the Charles Schwab Challenge, and his ball flight is just, I mean, it's unreal. And I think he's kind of married that with an ability to score and an ability to put some rounds together. He's playing, I think you could argue that he's playing the best golf of his life. If you look at his strokes gained numbers, they're far better right now than any other season he's had on the PGA Tour. I think he's quietly really hot, and I like him to win this week at the 3M Open.
My pick to click is really off the radar screen, but Patrick Rodgers. Now, here's a guy who came out with all those Jordan Spieth and Daniel Berger, and he was a great amateur player. He had more wins than Tiger at Stanford. Hasn't cashed in yet, but, he's played 24 times now in this elongated season that had the 3-month hiatus in the middle. He tied for 18th last week at Memorial and played good on the weekend. And I think this is significant because he missed the cut the week before at the Workday Charity Open. So he went to work. I mean, he grinded and played much better on a more difficult golf course. It's about time for Patrick Rodgers to win. He is that talented. He's number 68 in FedEx Cup points. Strokes gained putting, he's 11th on the PGA Tour. I'm surprised he hasn't won yet, but he's a young guy who has matured over the years. He got married last summer, so his personal life is in a really good spot. And if you go out and watch this guy, and I watch him practice and I watch him play, and it's one of those things I say, how come he hasn't won yet? Because he really, really has game, and I think it'll click this week. He's in that window now where you have 4 or 5 weeks where you play your best golf. I think Patrick Rodgers is right now in that window that players like.
All right, love to hear it. Doug Bell, Kyle Porter, thank you so much for joining us. Get a pen and pencil, write this down, take a screenshot here. We're going to recap their picks for you. So going with Kyle Porter, his sleeper, Doc Redman, top 10 lock, Tony Finau, his pick to win, Harris English. A little bit different for Doug Bell there. However, they both like Harris English. His sleeper, Lucas Glover, his top 10 lock, Harris English, and his pick to win, Patrick Rodgers. By the way, if you'd like more expert picks, our Rick Gaiman just put out his fantasy golf power rankings for the 3M Open. It is on Sportsline. You can join right now for just $1. That's all it takes. Go to sportsline.com/join there. By the way, coverage on CBS of the 3M Open Saturday and Sunday, 3 Eastern on CBS. Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.